And how's it going? And welcome to No Fun Allowed. And today you are joined by a very special guest, one of, if not the biggest author on all the DMs Guild, writer of some of the most incredible work around, JVC Parry. How is it going?
Hi, hello everyone. Yeah, it's going well with me. How are you?
I am fan frickin' tastic. That's kind of my MO around here. So today we're going to be talking about all the amazing stuff you've done and all the writing process and just the things that are going on in this great community that we are part of. So to kick this whole thing off, JVC Perry, first off, I just want to go ahead and shout out you are a workhorse. 81 projects on the DMs Guild. Some of those are repeats because they're like, transfers or whatever. But,
Yeah.
still 81, that's 81 more than most people, right? So that's a workload. That's a ton. So,
Yeah.
not everyone started off with these 81 incredible best-selling projects on the DMs Guild. Most people start off with nothing. So most people just started writing some words at some point. So, how
Yep.
did you start in the writing game? What influenced you to go ahead and say, hey, there's actually something to be found here?
Yeah. I think I started in the way that most people do, like you say, just scribbling a few words down and seeing where it goes. My first published product was in 2016, and I published kind of a hack of an adventure, I guess, that I'd run a few different times to introduce different groups of people to the game. So it's called Seeds of Chaos. It's up for free. It has always been, and it will always be free, just because it's my intro adventure. And I like to think it gives people, even though it's quite old now, it gives people a little bit of a taste of my writing style. So I basically just accumulated notes every time I ran that adventure. And when I thought, oh well, I've actually got quite a packet of notes here, I was thinking, well, can I do anything with this? I'd shared um, monster stat blocks and bits of lore from my own games on Reddit, which is where I guess I got my into the kind of homebrew community. And then I saw that the Dungeon Masters Guild had launched. I think I heard about it through a Dragon Talk podcast. And really, before then, I'd never heard of anything like an OGL or an SRD, anything like that, with a D20 boom. None of that was really on my radar. Um, so I just took it from a blank canvas saying, oh, okay, this is a place where I can just publish my work and people will see it. So that was what I really cared about, was, people playing through the stuff I'd written. So that was essentially my kind of startup into the world of writing and publishing. Was just, here's some notes. I'm going to put them up there for people to have a look at if they want to.
I mean, that's awesome. Taking the thing that you've blown up and loved and, giving it to the world. That's an incredible feeling and awesome
Yeah,
task.
yeah.
So, did you go to school for writing, or is this just some natural talent, or?
Well, definitely don't think it's natural talent. I mean, I look back on some of my early adventures and I think, man, I should really go back and polish those up. And I have done for quite a few of them, actually. But I did a degree in zoology and then a master's in biological sciences. I spent a lot of time, about 3 years in the lab to get my master's, and by the end of it, I just kind of realized that kind of work wasn't for me. It's really long hours, 7 days a week in a room without windows, just doing the same kind of robotic exercises over and over again. And what do you get at the end of it? A little piece of paper saying, yeah, I published this thing. And for me, I didn't feel like the work I was doing was making any great impact on society. I couldn't see the outcomes of what I was doing. And so it was quite unfulfilling for me. Um, so then I basically just kind of strung along a few just generic day jobs. I worked as a lighting engineer for a little while, just weird stuff, whatever I could get my hands on. But I was always writing D&D stuff on the side. It was around my master's that I really, kind of started publishing on the DMs Guild seriously. I was starting to see a decent amount of money coming from it, not enough to live off, but enough to eventually, justify working part-time. And I was writing part-time, and basically it just grew from there to the point where I could be doing it full-time and not relying on a part-time job. But no, I think at some point, I think I would like to go and, do like maybe some writers retreats or have a crack at a creative writing masters, something like that. But I don't have any, formal training in writing at all.
I mean, I think you are a perfect example of you don't need school to succeed.
Yeah, probably.
Formal education, informal education, stuff like that. None of that is a true, clone of the real thing. There is no substitute for experience, and
absolutely.
Obviously, your list of experience far exceeds most people. So it's absolutely incredible stuff. So you're sitting there, you're going to college or your university for all my non-US people. 50% of my viewers aren't US any people anyway. So you are doing these things for D&D, but is that when you also started D&D, or have you been a nerd full time?
Yeah, I mean, my first ever exposure to even the idea of Dungeons and Dragons was a computer game called Icewind Dale 2.
Oh.
I've got no idea when it was published. I bought it at a jumble sale for like 50p, probably when I was in my early teens. And I played the heck out of it. I just thought it was a cool fantasy game. I was reading a lot of fantasy at the time. I didn't realize it was D&D until much later. My next kind of interaction with the game was I knew some people playing in a D&D game that was full at my school. And they were my mates, and they said, to be honest, we don't really have any room for you to play. They already had like 8 players, I think.
Oh, God.
But if you want to do something like draw maps or anything like that, you could have a crack at that. So I was like, yeah, what, fine. I'll just draw up some maps for these guys. So, started on my gridded paper, drawing maps and thinking of monster environments and lairs and really basic stuff, the stuff that's been covered 1,000 times, because I've never seen a monster manual or the rule book or, any. I think they must have been playing 3.5, but I'd never heard of D&D at that point, really. So my first true game wasn't until my first year of university, where I played in a hack of, it might have been a D&D. It was called Osric, OSRIC. Yes. It was complicated. We didn't really understand it. My friend just sort of said, I'm basically going to tell this fantasy story. There are some rules here that we'll kind of use when we understand what they mean. And we played for a bit there. And then that was kind of the advent of 5th edition. So I think the next year, 5th edition came out. And so all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, there's this new version of D&D now that we can all play. Let's give it a go. And for me, that was when I really became captured. And that was when I really started playing, week in, week out. Throughout university, I was playing maybe 2-3 games a week, in the downtime, in those long lost days of undergraduate work. So yeah, 5th edition was really my proper introduction to the game. I've not, I never dabbled in 4th or 3.5, anything like that.
Well, some of them are hard to go back to after you experience the new stuff. Right? So during that time, are you a player full time, or do you finally start delving into being a DM?
No, I started DMing almost from the bat, really. So as soon as 5th edition came out, I was the one to buy all the books. I was just obsessed with this stuff. As soon as I kind of got involved in the community, I could just see I was going to become totally addicted to it. So, I was on all the Reddits all the time. I was a massive follower of like Matt Colville, people like that really were showing new people how to get into the game. I try to think of, like a lot of actual play podcasts. How We Roll podcast is a British one that I loved a lot. Total Party Kill, all sorts of, and those really, it was kind of the multimedia aspect of it that really drew me in, because not only was I able to read the books in front of me, but I was also able to see people playing them and how to play the game without just trying to have to bumble through it myself. So I did start DMing very early. I played in 1 game and I DM'd 2 games in the first year that I discovered 5th edition. And then over the next 2 to 3 years, that ended up whittling down to just the 1 game I was DMing. But, we were still playing maybe once, maybe twice a week, during term time at least. And then there'd be these stretches during the break where everyone, we didn't play online. It baffles me that we never really played online because obviously all we do is play online now.
Yeah.
But, we weren't playing, and it was in those kind of down periods where my DM brain was still ticking and I was still having all these ideas that I really got into the DMs Guild, because I was like, well, I've got to put all these ideas somewhere. They don't fit in my campaign. A lot of the time it'd be stuff that was, totally foreign to my campaign because I'd done all my prep and now I just wanted to work on something different. And that was where a lot of those early adventures, things like Gauntlet of Flame, those all came into play. But I also published some of the stuff I'd run.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're sitting there and you're running all these games and you're like, okay, I can't fit everything here, but someone's going to play this, gosh darn it. So you start submitting to the DMs Guild. So we talked about your very first submission there, which is free. Links down below. It's going to be flashing on screen, all that fun jazz.
Yeah. Sure.
But the thing is you didn't stop with one. you went and went and went. So, you submit that very first one, and then you're thinking, oh, okay, this is cool and all. But what fueled you? What actually kicked you to start pushing that second one and then that third one? What was that drive?
Really, it was feedback, because, in the early days of the guild, I think I came to it. I'm not exactly sure when it launched, but I think I came to it pretty early on, within the first year or so. And it was at that point, it was a really kind of small community. There were people publishing stuff, but the people who were actively engaging in Discord channels and Facebook groups and that kind of thing, they were quite vocal, and probably you knew most of the people. You saw them again and again and again, so you kind of got to know these people and their personalities. And really, it was the feedback I got from people, and a lot of the time it was negative feedback. People saying, "This is so derivative." "Oh, this reminds me of an old adventure." "Oh, your writing has no style," that kind of stuff. And I think, okay, man, this is harsh feedback, but I am new to it. I'm totally new to the guild. I'm totally new to Dungeons and Dragons. Like I said, I've not played these old editions, so I don't know what's new and exciting and what's not. And so then really those kind of negative feedback were what fueled me to keep writing and publishing. And then slowly, as customers, because for a while I think it was a lot of other creators buying my work, and then all of a sudden the guild became more popular, and customers, normal people started buying it, and I started seeing good feedback. People saying, "Oh, I never would have thought this," and it was that kind of balance of trying to impress other creators, but also trying to just satisfy the customers and stay true to my own style of writing. It was finding that balance that really kept me going, kept me writing. And at that time, I was obsessed with 5th edition. Every book that came out, I was scrolling online for spoilers and like sneak previews. I was watching all the reviews, that kind of thing. I couldn't get enough of it. And so it was that whole kind of frenzy of, well, I can do this. I can actually write stuff that people are going to enjoy, people are going to play, and I can make it work. And it wasn't really until much later, probably about 3 years on, 2019 kind of time, that I started seeing, I started realizing, oh, I'm making money from this. It was no longer a case of just pulling out the cash whenever I needed money at university. It started becoming a thing where, oh, I'm going to withdraw money now every month as if this was like a part-time job salary. And that was kind of a real shift.
Yeah, that's awesome that you can make that shift, and that's also awesome that you can overcome the adversity, because I know a fair few number of people that, they get that criticism, that bad feedback, as it were, and that'd just be over, right? But you were able
it's hard. It is hard. Like some of the people, it was people I really respected. I won't name any names, but it was big. It was creators who are big now saying, I just don't think you've got it, or, why would you do it this way and not this way? That kind of a thing. And, eventually those people changed their minds, and they're people I've collaborated with now. So it was really rewarding to sort of earn their respect and show to them, I can do this. I'm a newbie, sure, but I have got something worth reading.
Yeah, so speaking of that, you're putting out these works and you're putting them out, but is there a schedule to your method of madness, or are you grabbing them and making a stockpile, spreading them over time? You just release it right as you hit enter on that final page. What is the method there on releasing stuff to the DMs Guild?
So in the early days, well, it's still true now that I'm impatient. I'm not very good at sitting on stuff. I'll have an idea and I'll just think, yeah, now's the time to do it. And so in the very early days, it literally was, okay, I published that last one. Now I'm going to work on the next one. And as soon as that was done, and, it was so easy for me to use tools like Home Brewery to put it into a D&D-esque layout. And then bam, off it went, bam, off it went. It was just a case of, finding a decent cover, finding some interior artwork, and then putting it up there. I've never been good at marketing, so it'd be throwing a link or two on Facebook and just going, there we are, have it. I'm on to the next one now. Don't bother asking me any questions because I've already forgotten. And then slowly over time, I started writing longer adventures. A lot of my early stuff is probably only around the 10-page mark. So I started writing longer form. I started collaborating with other people. One of the big collaborations I did early on was Monsters of the Guild. And that really taught me, not everyone is working at the same schedule as I am. People do need more time to produce, brilliant things. And actually, it's worth taking the time to write something, leave it for a bit, take another look in a couple of weeks' time and see what you can change, play test it a few times and see how you can make alterations to improve it. So over time, I started slowing down the release rate. And you can kind of see that in my adventure compendiums. The first one has got loads of adventures in, the next one kind of less, the next one I think only about half a dozen, and then that was it. After that I was like, I'm not producing enough content each year to even fill these up, but what I am producing is fewer higher quality products. And then that really was where the seeds from Call from the Deep came from, because I thought, we play these amazing long adventures that are written by Wizards of the Coast. I've got an idea for one. I'm going to give it a go. And that, that took me, the whole process of Call from the Deep took a really long time from start to finish, over a year. Yeah.
We're going to definitely be diving into that later on, because there is a whole lot to dive in with that.
Hey.
Oh, no. So, I can't get over that. So, you're putting out all this content. You touched upon this a little bit here, but you started off making your content a certain way, and then it is where it is now. Did you see that shift over time, that gradual change in your approach to writing, in your approach to releasing, your research? What was the, compare yourself then versus midway versus now kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, although it felt like a natural progression of my writing changing rather than me consciously going, oh, I'm going to do this to change it. It felt like it just flowed out, and you would see other creators producing things that were way high quality now. So when I first started publishing on the Guild, you really only needed a good-ish cover. It could be one of the 3 pieces of artwork and no one would blink because people hadn't seen it before. And like I say, just use Home Brewery to make the layout, real quick and easy work. And it was up there in, sketch maps that I'd drawn myself. I wouldn't have anyone edit it. I might get someone to proofread it for me at the very most. But then over time, people started really investing more and more into their products. And it was kind of a case of wanting to keep up with that. So, I started hiring editors. I started hiring professional artists to do the artwork, professional cartographers to draw all the maps, that kind of thing. And that whole process of bringing other people in, not only does it improve a project an awful lot, but it also means, out of necessity, things take longer. But that, I definitely think that's an advantage. It's fun to just spit out stuff as fast as you can, because it feels rewarding. I think I definitely am kind of the generation where I'm instant gratitude, like I'm always on the phone, clicking there, such a doom scroller on Twitter, for example, because I just want to get that next little adrenaline bump of seeing something interesting. And so I think when I started writing, that was definitely the case. I was just continually throwing stuff out, whereas now it's a lot slower because I consult with more people. I get editors, I get sensitivity readers, I get proofreaders, I get, a range of artists doing different parts. I get cartographers to work on the maps. I get play testers to help me test it out, and then I make revisions, and then it goes through the whole process again. So I think it was a case of keeping up with other people, but also wanting to just improve what I was doing.
That's awesome, because I know that some people would be stuck in their ways, or maybe people just wouldn't want to keep up, or they say, screw you all, I'm doing my own way. But but the fact that you're willing to go out of your way to do that stuff is fantastic, and the quality is showing, and obviously you said it yourself that the things get better over time, and as you spend more time on things, you do release less, but quality over quantity, sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's just like take a look at just one random product here. How long would it take for you to release a single product now?
Yeah, so for me, if I was just writing a short adventure now, I could probably write a short adventure in a week, and have that first draft done and dusted. But then, I'd want to reach out to artists who could take months probably to paint their particular pictures. I would want to play test it, which, depending on the availability of groups, can take months as well. And then you've got to think about, okay, once it's been play tested, I'm going back for a second draft. I'm getting it edited. I'm finalizing the maps, and then I'm commissioning the maps, which will also take more months. So even a short adventure nowadays can take 6 months to a year.
Wow.
And that's for a self-published person who's, trying to hit that kind of top tier of quality, basically. But for me now, I'm in a case where I'm working full-time as a freelancer. So it tends to be the case that I'm juggling loads of balls. I've got loads of projects on the go at once, and most of those projects I'm just the writer for. So I don't need to worry about being an art director. I don't need to worry about sorting out the maps, that kind of thing. I don't need to worry about sorting out play testing. I'm just there to write the first draft, take the notes from the editor, and then, revise it in a way they see fit. And at that point, my association with the project ends until it gets released, and I can get excited about it again. And that's, for those big Kickstarters that I work on, things like Lawsmiths, Remarkable Shops, Remarkable Inns, and stuff like Nord Games, Treacherous Traps, that sort of project that's a big hefty book. I'm finished on those maybe a year, maybe even 2 years before they actually hit the shelves, So that has been a real regime shift of starting to work for other companies. You're drawing out the timeline even further, to the extent where I'm almost, forgetting about stuff. And then someone tags me going, oh, this thing you wrote for us is now about to be, on Tuesday it's coming out. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did write that 2.5 years ago,
those big projects, as you said, they take time, especially like, Remarkable Inns, how many dozens of names are in that book, right? So, I can't imagine the process of editing through all that, right? But for sure, those big projects that you're working on, whether that be your own writing or your freelance work, absolutely incredible stuff. Those Kickstarters, by the way, those Kickstarters are now a huge part of our community, not just the DMs Guild or Drive Through RPG or whatever else. Kickstarters are really kicking off. I'm terrible. I love to see that, the fact that, we're just a collection of, essentially nobodies, we're just a bunch of writers and artists and whatever else. And we all come together, and we are now kicking things off and just making these awesome products that, are full blown, they essentially compete with, big companies, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is amazing. Kickstarter has really kind of democratized the process of creation and publishing, especially where, it can be a one-person business creates this amazing thing, gets it funded for loads of money, can make a really professional go of it. Whereas, before that platform existed, I think it was a case where if you didn't already have the money, you couldn't set up a publishing business. So I do think it's been a real boon. And also, there's pluses and negatives to both, but the DMs Guild, when you publish something there, you lose 50% of everything you make in terms of cash flow, whereas Kickstarter fees are a much lower percentage. It varies per project, but they're typically a lot lower. So although you don't get access to all the Wizards of the Coast IP, you can still produce really amazing D&D content, and you make more for yourself from those projects.
That, and you got a huge window to gauge interest versus, I feel like if you're on the DMs Guild, you publish it and you just gotta, you gotta pray and hope that people show up, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But I will say, anything with your name on it obviously gets a lot of eyes looking at it. So, but you had to work for it, so that's fair. So, these projects that you're working on, whether they be your own or the freelance work that you're doing, absolutely incredible stuff. But of course, one big thing, you made a module. You made a module that absolutely rivals the modules that are coming out from Wizards of the Coast. We came out with just recently Candlekeep Mysteries, which was a collection of small adventures. But before then, there was Rime of the Frost Maiden, and your work, Call from the Deep, is huge. It's ginormous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and the crazy thing about that is, I expected to look at that and be like, okay, you had to work with every other DM's Guild author to put this out, right? You had to sit there and do all this, this and that. No. How the heck did you do that? How is that possible?
It took a long time. So I had the initial idea way back, and just this kind of general idea of a campaign I wanted to run. And that's something I wanted to do in the Forgotten Realms, because when I came up with the idea, I'd not run in the Forgotten Realms before. So I started kind of researching and planning out this thing. I got a big sheet of paper. I wrote down all the events I wanted to occur in the campaign I was going to run, and joined them up based on who was involved and a kind of general timeline. I then went and did loads of research into different locations in the Forgotten Realms, different factions. So I was reading books from old editions. I was listening. Dragon Talk and Lore You Should Know has always been a massive kind of source of inspiration for me, as well with just Chris Perkins's articles in general, I think are great. And so I was collecting all this information and slowly accumulating it. And eventually I got to the point where I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to write this stuff to run it anyway. So let's have a go at writing it. And, it's kind of a passion project. If it doesn't do that well, it doesn't matter, because it's, I didn't think it would be commercially successful. I didn't think there was a market for it, because, as you say, Wizards of the Coast puts one out every year, maybe sometimes 2 a year. And people love them. That's what people are looking forward to, is the next hardcover adventure, right? And so I thought, well, no one's going to really, maybe a few people will buy it, but I can't see that it's going to be that popular. But as I started writing and getting more of the artwork and the maps and sharing that stuff on social media, I really started to see that people were genuinely interested in it. And they weren't just saying, this looks cool. They were saying, when does this come out so I can buy it? And at that point, it really started to dawn on me that I should do this properly. I should really put the money into getting high quality artwork, high quality maps, that sort of thing. And editing, high quality editing, importantly. So I used a lot of my old DM's Guild profits to fund this, almost like a big make or break, really. I basically put everything I'd earned into it. I thought, if this does well now, then that's amazing. Maybe I can build off of it. And if it doesn't, well, it's a good opportunity for me to take a bit of a break. I've done a lot of hard work on this now. I was finishing off my master's, so I kind of needed the time to write up my thesis, that kind of thing. So I just went for it in the end. And it did take a very long time. Writing it alone took months and months. Then sending it to be edited took a long time. Waiting on the artwork was the most kind of painstaking thing. You're opening your inbox every day like, oh, is there going to be new artwork in here, or am I going to have to wait another week? But so rewarding to see, scenes you've written and thought about in your head come to life on the page. And then, I did also run it at the same time as I was writing it. So I would write a piece, I would play through it, I would adjust it, and then I would send it off to the editor. So it was a very long process, and you know, I have to be honest. I'm really proud of myself that I managed to pull it off, because it is a big book. It's 270 pages. I think about 170,000 words, something like that. So it's a mammoth. Yeah, it's a mammoth project. And it did take time. I was working on it in the background for a very, very long time. But you can do it. I think a lot of the time people see it and they think there's no way I could do that. But you can. You just got to be kind to yourself and let yourself work at your own pace. If it takes you 10 years to get it done, if it takes you 25 years to get it done, it's fine. You don't need to put that pressure on yourself of getting it done in 2 years or getting it done in a year and a half or anything like that. You know, I think if it work on it when you feel passionate about it. And if you do that, then it will always be better than sitting down like, okay, I have to get this done. Then too much pressure will ruin the kind of creative inspiration that you've got.
Absolutely. You know, the journey of 160,000 words starts with a single keystroke, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, these things take time. I'm starting to write some stuff for the DMs Guild. I haven't published any yet, but I'm just about to, you know. And I'm sure many viewers are in the same boat where we're sitting there and we're writing up our passion projects, but you know, you can't rush things. You don't want to rush things. So when it came to this one in particular, did you have that mentality of I need 1,000 words a day? I need, you know, did you come up and just say I'm going to write when I want to write, and that's that. I'm not going to bother counting.
Yeah, I just wrote when I felt good about it. I mean, there were times when I would feel really inspired and I'd wake up, you know, before work every day and I'd write for an hour or two. I'd come home in my lunch break, work again and type away. And then in the evening, you know, I'd do a couple more before I had to cook dinner, that sort of thing. And then there'd be other times where for 2 weeks on the trot, 3 weeks, I just think, I'm not feeling it. I'm tired. I was working, I was doing a master's. I just didn't have the time for it. I needed a break to socialize, see people, do other stuff. So no, I never set targets like that. That sort of kind of project-based mentality has only come as I've started freelancing more, because, you know, I'm a bit of a deadline specialist. People often call me in when other writers have dropped out or they need a stretch goal that they kind of had forgotten about. So that sort of, more strict, here's how many words I'm going to write per hour, didn't come in until really the past few years, where I started working on other people's projects. And, you know, it was other people I had to answer to instead of just myself.
Yeah. So in regards to that, you know, when you are writing your own projects, they are of your own mind, of your own soul, of everything else. And then you compare that to the freelancing work where you are working under a certain guideline. I've talked to many different writers and you know, various peoples, and some people say that it's liberating to work under someone because you have a structure versus, you know, if you're just writing your own thing. What is your take on writing for yourself versus freelancing?
It's very, very different, is what I would say. It's good in many ways and it's bad in a couple of ways. It's good because you're right. You've got someone there to say, you know, we need to get this done. Here's a timeline. I'm going to help you get everything in place, get the plan in place, start the writing and get the first draft. And that kind of structure can be really beneficial, especially when you've got someone else to kind of hold you accountable for it. And I think people could probably do quite well in pairing up or getting together in small groups and just sort of saying, you know, checking in once a week and going, you know, how's your adventure going? How's your subclass coming along? That kind of thing. And just, you know, almost managing each other, but without the pressure of, I need to get this done or I'm not going to get paid, you know? So I think that structure can be used by non-professionals who are looking to publish on the DMs Guild and that sort of thing. It's also great because once you've been self-publishing for a while, or at least once I'd self-published for a long time, you know, I was starting to run out of ideas. After Call from the Deep, I was pretty burnt out. I'd written a massive thing. I'd used every ounce of my creative inspiration up. And then so to have people approach me saying, "Oh, I've had this idea. Could you help me write it?" That was quite refreshing, because I still got to do the writing, which I loved, but I didn't. Oh, the dog's run up. Hi, Baz. I didn't have to. I didn't have to come up with all of the ideas on my own. And collaboration is such a rewarding experience when you can bounce ideas off of each other and come up with something totally new that you maybe would never have thought of on your own. The downsides are, there is a bit of pressure. You are responsible at that point for somebody else's work. And if you don't do a good job, are they going to come back to you with another project? Are they going to be happy with what you've done? That pressure is there. But I think you can get used to that sort of thing by publishing on the DMs Guild or by publishing on a drive-through before you try to step into doing a more full-time freelancing gig.
Yeah, and your approach to it, starting off small and eventually expanding out to what it is I think definitely one of the better ways to go instead of diving right in, because you'll probably definitely have a much more different mentality of how the world works in that sense. So so not only have you done your own projects and then also these freelancing works, but you mentioned it, you do collaboration work. You've worked with many of the fine authors on the DMs Guild, and when you're doing those in particular, is that the same sort of experience where there's a head of the project, or is it truly a round table where you all come together?
I think there's normally at least a handful of people who are sort of in charge, right? For Monsters of the Guild, which was my first big collaboration, there were a small group of us who were in charge of different aspects of the project. Some people in charge of doing the fantasy grounds conversion, some people in charge of sorting out the artwork or the layout, that kind of thing. And then for other projects, I've worked loads with Jeff Stevens, and Jeff basically wears all the managerial hats. He sorts out getting all the artwork. He sorts out finding someone to do the layout. He sorts out managing the writers. And so for those collaborations, it really is a case of, here's what I want you to do. Just let me know when you've done it, basically. And both are good. And I think it really depends on how you like to work. If you like to just work for one person, then there are plenty of people out there who are willing to hire small writers. If you would rather be involved in a more of a collaborative experience, that's a possibility as well, because, people do get together and tell stories together. That's the nature of D&D. It's all about storytelling together. And if you can find a couple of people who you can tell stories together with in a way that, can be translated onto paper easily, then that's an amazing thing to do. I've done a couple of adventures where, we've all sort of been consulting with each other on the narrative and on the mechanics and the writing, and that can be amazingly rewarding. But you have to know the people a bit better. I think it's quite difficult to do that with strangers, whereas writing to a brief for a stranger is a lot easier.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you build a rapport with over time. Put your name out there, and eventually people are going to recognize it, and people start coming together. Yeah. So, myself, I really want to know this, but I know many viewers do, is what is your guidance? What are your words of wisdom for kicking things off on the DMs Guild? Or just putting yourself out there in general?
So, I think there's two sides to the coin. I think one side is the practical admin-y side, and one side is the creative side. So on the creative side, the best thing you can do is just find inspiration. Keep searching for it until you find a project that you're really passionate about. I wouldn't, if you've had an idea and you think, oh, this could be good, just wait for a little bit longer, ingest some more media, read some more books, listen to some more podcasts or music or whatever it may be that inspires you. And wait for the one that you really feel, this is it. I'm really excited for this. Let's get going. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to run with the first thing that comes into your head. Take some time to really consider it. And then on the admin side of things, I would suggest using tools that are free to start off with, because it's easier. Use things like the home brewery. because it can make a layout for you for nothing, relatively quickly. It's easy to learn. And it just makes stuff look great. You can't deny it. If you want your books to look like Wizards of the Coast books, that is the tool to use. Use the free artwork resources that the DMs Guild has, or maybe invest a little bit in stock art from Drive-Thru or DMs Guild. You can get quite good artwork really good artwork for less than $10, less than $5 sometimes. And once you've got those sort of things in place, you'll feel like you're doing it properly. Do you know what I mean? You won't worry so much about, but is it just going to look like black words on a white page? You think, no, there's tools out there that can help you change that up. So those would be my kind of big suggestions. And another one is read about how other people have done it, because we're talking about it everywhere. I've been on loads of YouTube interviews, loads of podcasts. I've got a newsletter where I talk about writing. I've written for the RPG Writer Workshop. There are loads of kind of entry channels into publishing, because 99% of people in this industry want to help other people get into it. It's not, I hardly know anyone who is gatekeeping, and saying, no, I want all of this pie for myself.
I don't want any competition.
Exactly. Yeah. There's hardly anyone that, I know a few people like that. And most of those people aren't publishing anymore because it wasn't, it was kind of a toxic space for them. They were viewing everyone else as competition. And so they weren't building these relationships with people that are what help us through in times where we're not feeling inspired. So, reach out to someone, send someone an email, send someone a message on Discord, whatever it is, on Twitter, because people will reply and people will try to help you.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome advice. Thank you so much. So to finally wrap this thing up here, I just want to talk about what you want to see next in regards of our future, in regards of the nerd kingdom that we have claimed as our own. So what do you want to see next from Wizards of the Coast?
Yeah, from Wizards, I think, I'm at a point now where I've got enough books from Wizards, to be honest. I don't get so excited anymore about the next release in the way that I used to. And really what I'd like to see from Wizards now is just kind of working on the human side of things. I would like to see them diversifying a little bit. I would like to see them trying to be more representative in their artwork and in their company, really. There are, unfortunately, a lot of bad stories coming out of Wizards of the Coast. And it would be nice to see the right people in the jobs, and people being more inclusive, and people coming out of there feeling valued, really. So for me, I don't need more content from Wizards. I need better content, I think.
Yeah, as we mentioned before, quality over quantity. I certainly think that is key. Because if you're not familiar with TSR's approach to D&D, they were just 15, 20 books a year, It's like, do we really need all that? I personally don't think so. What do you want to see next from the community?
From the community, I think we're doing great stuff already. Everybody is really banding together and trying to support each other. And I think seeing that ongoing support is what means the most to me. I think recently, and I think it's in part due to the Twitter algorithm, but I find this with all social media, is that, I started doing a lot on Reddit. And then eventually I kind of found that the bigger the Reddit communities got, the less fun they were to be in. And I'm finding the same thing with Twitter now, that I used to really love Twitter, but then as I got more and more followers and started following more and more people, I only see arguments, I only see kind of people slamming each other, or people talking nonsense about other people's work or other people's games. So really what I want to see is people coming together. And, sometimes people do need to be called out for what they've done, but I think, it means so much more to me when I see people coming together and saying, this was done really well. Other people should do things like this, rather than saying people shouldn't do things in this way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you talked about it before, but we should be building each other up, not tearing each other down. I certainly think that we are stronger, united, and making our community shine versus, allowing that toxicity to flow. But unfortunately, the internet loves toxicity, so... I certainly would love to hit the purge button on some things, but can't do it all, right? Lastly, what do you want to see from yourself?
Yeah, so I'm hoping this year that I will be able to kickstart another big 5th edition campaign. You know, Call from the Deep now was quite a long while ago. I've written Dragon Relic since then, but that was kind of, I had some stepping stones in place to help me out with that one because it was using some stuff I'd already written. I wrote a couple of smaller things that I've published on the DMs Guild, but what I'd really like to do is see if I can do another big thing again. As you know, a lot of my work at the minute is freelancing for other companies. And so I think it would be refreshing for me to, strike out on my own again. So I've got a few ideas. I've written a few kind of tentative plans for campaigns. And I'm hoping that towards the end of this year, I'll be able to say, this is going to be the next big one. So keep your eyes peeled.
Awesome stuff. And because you've got that experience of already doing one, I'm sure that your next one's going to be just as grand and totally awesome. You laid forth the foundation. Alrighty. That was absolutely a blast to talk to you about the stuff that we love so much, about all the amazing work that you're putting out, and, the community in regards of making this awesome content. So thank you so very much, JVC Parry. Go ahead and sell yourself.
Thanks for having me.
Go ahead and tell us about everything.
Well, so the best place, because social media can be toxic, the best place to follow along with what I'm doing is my email list, because it's more direct. I can have one-on-one conversations with people who reply to the emails, and I can also, sit down and take some time to think about what I'm writing. So the mailing list is the best place to hear about what I'm up to and my new projects. But you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. I'm on Discord if you prefer to chat through Discord. And, there are various servers that I'm quite, active in. You can find me on DMs Guild. You can find me on DriveThruRPG. I have my own website, jvcparry.com. I've got some indie games on itch. And I've run a couple of Kickstarters over the past year or so. So you can also check out my stuff on Kickstarter.
Yeah. All right. So that's awesome. You're a workhorse. You got a whole bunch of everything. It's totally awesome. So thank you so very much, JVC Parry. Absolute blast to talk to you. And I seriously cannot wait to see what comes out of you next, and the community next, and Wizards of the Coast next.
Thanks.
So thank you so much for talking. Thank you everybody for listening. This was absolutely a delight. Thank you so much for listening, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.